Hello, my name is Kyle Suggs, and welcome to my channel where we talk about culture, TV, and movies, and we filter it right. This time, I'm going to talk about tax day. We just covered it. Today is Tuesday, April 16th. Yesterday was tax day, the best time of the no, not the best time of the year. However, I do want to talk about the fact of the impact that the new tax cuts have had. You know, they went in a year ago, and we saw the checks go in, the payments for everyone's deductions, paycheck going up a little bit during the year. And now we're actually seeing a full year tax return based on that. And I'm citing an article here, and you'll probably never see me ever cite an article in this level of detail on this channel from the New York Times. It's from April 14th, and it goes, face it, probably you got a tax cut. And it says studies consistently find that the 2017 law cut taxes for most Americans. Most of them don't buy it. So this article is pretty interesting. Number one, that it came from the New York Times, and two, that they were honest enough to report it. And number three, how the effects of the tax code change is more about perception and people's ability to, I don't want to be disparaging, but really for people to understand what's going on in their paychecks. Because when the Bush tax cut came down, we got a check in the mail. It was concrete. Woohoo! It was like a refund or whatever. And so we were able to spend that money. And so, but the thing is, I'm going to go through this article, and if this is too much in the weeds, I apologize, but this is culture, and this is what we deal with on a daily basis with taxes. And I just wanted to lay this out because this article is pretty balanced. I mean, it presents both sides, and I just want to cover this. All right, so let's kick this off real quickly. I'm going to read this. It starts off by saying, if you're an American taxpayer, you probably got a tax cut last year, and there's a good chance you don't believe it. Ever since President Trump signed the Republican-sponsored tax bill in December 2017, independent analysis have consistently found a large majority of Americans would owe less because of the law. Preliminary data based on tax filings has shown the same. Okay, so check this out. So just 20% of people who were polled were certain that they got a tax cut. An online poll that the New York Times did with SurveyMonkey found that just 40% of Americans believe they had received a tax cut. It says here, that's consistent with previous polls finding that most Americans felt that they hadn't got a tax cut and that a large minority thought their taxes had risen. Even though, not even 1 in 10% only 10% of the households in the entire country fell into that category. So the very few people in this country, 10% of this country, had their taxes increased. The majority of them either had their taxes be the same, or I think at 65% were higher. Okay? It says to a large degree, the gap between perception and reality on the tax cuts appears to flow from a sustained, misleading effort by liberal opponents of the law to brand it as a broad middle class increase. And see, here's the thing. This channel, culture, TV, movies, how we deal about social justice warriors, virtual signaling, and all this stuff. It's very important to understand when you have these narratives out there, and if people believe them, it can affect policy and it can affect buying decisions. Because if people don't know they're getting more money in the paycheck, or they don't think they're getting more money in the paycheck, then there's less conscious thinking about maybe they can save some of that money. They don't miss it in their check. And now I know it's the responsibility of people to understand what's coming in the paycheck, but let's face it, guys, today, people just don't know. They get direct deposit. They don't get a paycheck anymore. It drops in their account on whenever it does. People spend the money. And so some people were not understanding the tax law. And so when it dropped, they were like, oh my goodness, what's going on? I'm not getting a tax cut. They're pushing out the signal. I didn't get a tax cut. And everyone's pushing this. And now it makes the administration look bad. But the New York Times himself and many other people that I'm going to get into, left-leaning groups, have confirmed that most Americans got a tax cut. Okay, and so that's what and that's one of the reasons why I want to do this video, is because I want to just dispel a lot of this stuff. Okay, check this out. So after the law went into effect, Democrats played down those estimates, and instead of highlighting the projections that most Americans' taxes were set to increase in 2026, after individual tax cuts in the law are scheduled to expire. So when the law was passed, they did not have closure, or they did not have enough votes to merit it being a permanent tax cut, and so that would go into expiration in, I believe it says here, 2026. And so they can vote on it again, and then they could actually make it permanent. And so what the Democrats did, essentially, I'm not going to read it verbatim. What the Democrats did essentially was they played the narrative that, yes, these tax cuts are not going to be permanent, and they're going to expire, and therefore you're not getting a tax cut. And so they basically lied to the American people. And here it says that in convincing people that they would not benefit, the Democrats did a very good job, said Howard Gleckman, a senior fellow at the Tax Policy Center. He also goes on to say, quote, they were able to put that into public perception, and the reality has been unable to break that perception. So what he's saying is, unquote, so what he's saying is that no matter what happened in terms of the paycheck being increased, whether you're getting a tax refund or whatever, that reality has not changed the overall perception that the Democrats have put in place, that these tax cuts are not effective, that they're targeted at the middle class, and they're not going to be permanent, and they're going to only affect the rich people. Okay, and so that's what we're talking about here. Okay, so check this out. Also, so then here's the thing. So it says here that experts are divided on whether the tax cut was a good idea. That's fair, but there's little disagreement on this core point. Most people got a tax cut. All right, so let's go down here. It says, so now we have two independent sources of nonpartisan and left-leaning organizations that also verify this. So it says the Joint Committee on Taxation said Congress's nonpartisan team of tax analysts found that every income gap would see a tax cut on average. Every income gap would see a tax cut on average. So did the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. This is a left-leaning think tank that was sharply critical of the law in the beginning. But even they say that in a December 2017 analysis, it found that every income group in every state would pay less on average under the law in 2019. It's just math. It's just facts. That's the good thing about, conservatism. The good thing about being fiscally conservative and being conservative in general, facts don't change. A fact is a fact. And if it's done that way and it's told accurately, those things will not change. And so let me get to this part here. So also, H&R Block, the tax preparation giant, said last week, this is April, second week of April, or first week of April, said that 2/3 of returning customers had paid less tax this year than last, excluding people who owed no tax in either year. Taxes were down on average in every state. Personally, our taxes went down too, me and my family. So I can say personally, from an anecdotal, personal scenario, our taxes went down. So, and many of my friends' taxes went down, and those whose taxes didn't go down, they understood why it didn't go down because of whatever reason they didn't claim enough or whatever, or they didn't know what was happening. And so, but they understood why it didn't go down, but they were fully aware that it was better than it was the prior year. Okay. And like I mentioned before, so the average middle fifth earner would get about a $780 tax cut. But again, in 2001, when we got the George W. Bush, we got a check in the mail and we spent it. Now I'm going to frame in here. Okay. So let me just jump in here real quick and go off cuff a little bit. So in 2001, when that tax cuts came in and we spent that money, there was an influx in the economy because that happened. Well, I submit that as the year was going through, from January of this year, people's tax people's checks were getting bigger. That money was getting spent, regardless of whether or not they knew it or not. Extra money was being pumped into the economy, whether or not they knew it or not. So either way, I believe this administration will get benefit from this, whether or not a direct omission to this tax cut being beneficial, or the fact that the economy is booming because of it, and in spite of people not recognizing it. That's my point. So I think this is a good thing for the country regardless. Okay, here's a quote. Most people didn't recognize the increase in take-home pay, or at least didn't contribute to the tax cut, said Mr. Rigney. He was I don't have him quoted here, but some of them might realize it now, but they're filing their taxes, he said. But it's a little consolation to discover that you've received a couple $1,000s during the year, but you already spent it. How key is that? You have money in your account, but you've had money coming in that you would have gained, but you've already spent it because you didn't recognize it in the year. You didn't take the money, put it aside, save it, and use it for something earmarked for something else. Regardless, the economy will still benefit because that money was spent somewhere in the U.S. economy, even though that individual may not benefit because they didn't save it. And so this is one of the things I'm trying to talk about. And one of the reasons why this video is being done is because I want to stress that perception of reality can actually affect reality. If people think one way, they're going to do one way. And so that's why I want to be really clear about putting forth truthful narratives so that people can make wise decisions. If we're told that the sky is going to fall tomorrow, how are you going to act? Okay? How are you going to act? You know, if you're told that you are a worthless person who can't do for yourself, how are you going to act? Are you going to get up? Are you going to do something for yourself? Or are you going to lay in bed and say, well, I can just get me a check? This is exactly what I'm trying to talk about. And this is exactly what is the point to this video. Okay. Let's go ahead and we'll wrap this thing up. Okay. So it says surveys consistently show that what bothers Americans the most about the tax system is not that they pay too much, but that they think corporations and the wealthy pay too little. Now that already in itself is already a bad misperception, but that's what's also driving the negative talk on this tax cut. All right. And so then there's these two categories within the tax cut that affected three groups of people. There's the SALT deduction, which is the deduction for local, state, and local and state taxes, so-called SALT deduction. Okay, so what would happen here is if 2/3 of the American households took a standard deduction, okay, and so they weren't even dealing with the SALT deduction, and so or any other itemized deduction, and so they earned less than $75,000. And the cap was at $10,000, so it didn't affect them at all. And so they were comfortably below that $10,000 cap, and they were good. Okay, so they benefited. But then you had people who made above that, or the $250,000 a year, and they were subject to the AMT, right? And that's a monster, right? But the monster actually was defanged by the SALT. So it says here is paradoxically, many higher income taxes households weren't getting the SALT deduction. That's because the alternative minimum tax effectively wiped out many deductions, including the SALT. So the SALT deduction, which would have been an issue, was basically wiped out by the AMT. And then the net gain was that households actually saw a bump because of that, which ironically they normally would not have. And so that covers them. Now check this out. This is what's pretty cool about this tax cut. So the SALT cap did hurt some people though. Those who were above the $75,000 range, but were below the $250,000 range. So those who earned enough to pay a lot of the state and local tax, but not enough to be affected by AMT, they were hurt a little bit. A Treasury Department audit estimated that 11 million people fell into that category. So what's up with those 11 million people? Just because those 11 million people were subject to that particular SALT cap, the deduction for the child credit was doubled, okay? And they also cut marginal tax rates and the treatment of business income. And so with that double tax credit for children, that ended up helping them in the long run. And since a lot of people who were angry about the SALT were not thinking about it in the context of the stuff that actually benefited them. So it seems like this tax plan was well constructed. Now mind you, there's some debate as to why, how much it costs, and is it going to pay for itself as the Trump administration said it would? I say it will, simply because of the wealth of the economy and in terms of the money it's going to bring back into the economy. We probably won't see that until, maybe the second quarter of this year, or third quarter of this year, as money starts rolling in, especially Christmas time. So the verdict is still out on that. But for now, I think from my point of view, it seems like a success. And the last statement here, it says, you can construct specific examples of situations where people paid more, he added, but they're very specific and overall pretty unusual. And so there are some situations, he's saying, that where people had a situation where their taxes were a little bit worse off than 2017. But it would take, you had to find some really specific examples, and they would have to be really unusual for that to happen. So the New York Times is basically saying, hey, look, guys, this tax cut is absolutely beneficial, and that the studies of 2017 show this, and it's not really up for discussion. So again, I know this video is probably in the weeds. It's not really exciting, but I just want to stress how perception on the street, on the water cooler, out and about, from the media, saying that the tax cuts are not good. I saw more and more memes right when the tax filing started coming in, when people start getting their W-2s in. People start doing their early taxes to see what they're going to get for the following year, this year. And there's so many memes that said, this tax cut is not helping me. It's not helping my family, and I don't like it. And so, I think what we need to do is, really look at things hardcore. And those people who were saying that, a lot of them weren't paying attention to the taxes anyway. And so they really weren't understanding the tax law. So they were just going off of what they heard and what they saw based on what someone was told them, either from the DNC, the media, whatever, or a meme or whatever. And so those same people who were upset by the so-called tax cut not helping them are the same people that weren't paying attention anyway. So with that, if you enjoy the content in this channel where we take culture, TV, and movies and we filter it to the right, please consider hitting like and subscribe and sharing with your friends. Also, please check out the videos I have right here.